Hello everybody and welcome to Every Movie Ever. I'm your host Eric, and this is of course the program where we are reviewing every movie ever made. Starting today with A League of Their Own. Now this was certainly a favorite of mine in my youth. This is one that I know I saw growing up a number of times. Certainly a popular movie. I even remember being a big fan of the short-lived television series. But we're not talking about that today. We're talking about the movie, and it was one I hadn't seen in a while, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect out of it. But you know what? It's still a classic. Yes, it's a little schmaltzy. If you haven't seen it, this is the story of, it's the 1940s. The men have gone away to World War II, and so they start up a Major League Baseball league for women, and this follows one of the teams, in particular, a pair of sisters played by Lori Petty and the always amazing Gina Davis. So it follows their journey in the baseball team throughout the course of a season, and there's some push and pull. Lori Petty really loves the game and wants to be part of it. Gina Davis loves the game but kind of longs for her husband to return home and a home life. And then there's a bunch of misfits throughout. The team is coached by Tom Hanks in one of his more irascible roles, but certainly a fun one for him. Like I say, it is a little bit schmaltzy. It is a little bit, the good old days in some respects, but it's so effective. It really is. It's a tremendously engrossing movie, and it's a terrific movie to see in this regard. There aren't that many female sports movies. There are more now than there were then, but there still aren't a ton. And this is, the top of the heap in that sort of sub-genre. Davis and Petty are fantastic. Hanks is great. A lot of the supporting cast is fine. Madonna is in this, and I would say that she is only good, but that's, a lot better than Madonna often is. League of Their Own, it's justifiably a classic. 4 stars. Up next, let's talk about Monster. This is a movie that had a lot of acclaim when it came out, but I had never gotten around to seeing it. If you're unfamiliar, this is the movie where Charlize Theron plays real-life female serial killer Eileen Wuornos, with Christina Ricci there as Wuornos's girlfriend slash largely unwitting accomplice. This is a movie that at the time got a lot of attention for Theron's performance, and I believe, big asterisk on this, I think she won an Oscar for it, not 100% on that. And this is very much what I would call an acting movie. There are these movies throughout the pantheon of film that are remembered justifiably for one or maybe even 2 just great performances at their heart. And this is one of those. Theron is very good. The movie as itself goes, though, I don't think is all that memorable. It's fine. It's a fine movie. It's one of those movies that could sort of just as easily be a stage play. It is an acting movie. You are here to see the performances more than you're here to see a plot or anything like that. And because Theron is so good, and because Ricci is pretty good, that largely works. But it is still a movie that you could see structured on the stage. There are a lot of 2-person scenes, a lot of dialogue scenes, and not a lot else really going on. I would have to fall short of calling it engrossing. It is interesting, but the story is never told in such a degree that, I felt super attached to it. When Theron's on the screen, she's electric, but the rest of the movie falls a little bit short of the rest of that performance. Monster, 3.5 stars. Now let's go take a look at a Hollywood classic. This week's Hollywood classic, I suppose if you can call it that, is Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte. If you, like me, were a fan of the recent TV series Feud, which followed the longtime feud between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, then you know already that Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte was meant to be the follow-up to Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, reuniting Davis and Crawford. As it happened, Crawford was so, incensed with Davis by this point and didn't want to essentially play second fiddle to another eccentric Davis performance that she ended up dropping out, and Olivia de Havilland stepped in to play the second hand in this movie. The plot, such as it is, revolves around Bette Davis playing a crazy Southern woman who lives almost Miss Havisham style in this big Southern mansion that developers want to tear down to make a highway. Olivia de Havilland is her cousin, I think, who has come back into town to help convince her to move out. Joseph Cotten, who was always so great in the Orson Welles movies, but whose acting I find otherwise to be somewhat questionable, is also there as sort of a family friend doctor who's trying to help Olivia de Havilland convince Bette Davis to move out. Now, from that standpoint, this movie is a little bit soap opera-y, right? It's a little bit of a Southern Gothic soap opera about a crazy lady who they're trying to get to move out, and she sees things and this and that because she had been implicated in a murder in her youth. It's very complicated. This plot is very complicated. And so occasionally she'll see like a dead body or a head or something like that. And it's all, kind of a fine pot boiler until you get about 2/3 of the way through it and you find out that what's actually going on is that the supportive Olivia de Havilland is gaslighting Bette Davis with Joseph Cotten's help. They are putting like decapitated heads and things around the mansion to drive her crazy so they can put her in an asylum and get some money. And so that aspect of it elevates it somewhat, kind of brings it above the standard pot boiler. This whole thing was directed by Bob Aldrich, who also directed Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And what he's doing here, what I did appreciate about this movie, and another thing that helped elevate it, above sort of the Southern Gothic soap opera, is that this really does feel like a trash film that's being parlayed into a prestige picture. A lot like Baby Jane. With other actresses, this would be, a standard drive-in, forgettable exploitation affair. But the actors and the actresses in this really elevate it. And Aldrich takes full advantage of that. Otherwise, the film feels very much William Castle-esque, like something like The House on Haunted Hill, like there's a gimmick waiting around the corner. But to see those two sort of styles, this, hey, look, there's a head falling down the stairs, and this great actress's costume drama, sort of collide headfirst into each other, is pretty entertaining. It could have been a train wreck, but to Aldrich's credit, and especially to Bette Davis's credit, and Olivia de Havilland's credit, it ends up coming out to be a pretty entertaining movie, which is why I'm giving Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte 3.5 stars. Now it's time for Calling All Horror Hounds. All right, Horror Hounds. So a couple episodes ago, we talked Friday the 13th, and now we're back with Friday the 13th, Part 2. As I said before, I'm making my way through these movies as I've started listening to a podcast where they are talking about the movies, that podcast being In Voorhees We Trust with Gorley and Rust. And here's what I'm finding out even just 2 Friday the 13ths into this series. I don't love these movies. They're all right. I am not a big fan of slashers to begin with, and there are some great ones. Certainly, obviously, Halloween is going to spring to mind, but the Friday the 13th movies, which are, sort of Xeroxes of Halloween, just aren't working great for me. Now, that said, Friday the 13th Part 2, I do like more than Friday the 13th. I think it's a better movie. I think that our teenagers are more fun. I am glad that Jason is actually the killer in this one, as opposed to his mom, as played by Betsy Palmer, who makes a very brief appearance in this one. And I also like that Jason's legend is seeded throughout the movie, so that you have the camp counselors talking about, hey, did you hear about this Jason guy, what kills people, which gives the whole thing a little bit more of a sense of that the teens should be worried, as opposed to that they're just minding their own business and getting picked off. Here we get a little bit more of an idea of that they are putting themselves into a situation, and that they're aware of the boogeyman that might be hunting them down. Beyond that, though, it's, it's kind of a standard 80s horror movie with not a lot to recommend it or detract from it, which is why I'm giving Friday the 13th Part 2 3 stars. Now let's head over to the Christmas Corner. This is, of course, the part of the show where we are discussing Christmas movies, and more often than not, these are of the made-for-TV original, probably on the Hallmark Channel, variety. And today we're going to talk about The Christmas Train, which was advertised as being a Hallmark Hall of Fame movie, which means that in addition to selling greeting cards, they are suggesting that this movie is better than average, that this isn't, that they have their regular, we made these movies for the Hallmark Channel, but then this is Hallmark Hall of Fame. These are the ones that you used to see like on ABC or whatever. So The Christmas Train involves it's a bunch of people on a train at Christmas time, and in its way is very much Murder on the Orient Express, but at Christmas, and also there's no murder. But there are a lot of people on a train going through snowy countryside, and the train at some point gets stopped in the snow, and there are weird mysteries going on. This thing stars Dermot Mulroney, as well as Kimberly Williams, who you might remember from the Father of the Bride movies. They're our main couple who used to be boyfriend and girlfriend, and now they're trying to get back together. Danny Glover plays, I think, Kimberly Williams' boss, and he's a crazy rich guy that's trying to push them back together. Joan Cusack is also in this thing. She's got this kind of pathos, I lost a kid kind of a plot. And then there's this whole, there's all these coincidences going on where Dermot Mulroney's new girlfriend gets on the train, and there's a lot of this and that, and everybody's, and there's another couple on the train that's like newly engaged, and through that engagement, Dermot and Kimberly are starting to find each other again. It's very weird, and then it only gets weirder at the end as we come to a bizarre plot twist where we find out that the vast majority of the people on the train, including Dermot's new girlfriend, are actors hired by Danny Glover in an elaborate plan to get Dermot and Kimberly back together. Now, that is to say, this new fiancé or romantic partner, she's really her, but Danny Glover has paid her off to just be like, whatever, let's help my boyfriend get back together with his old girlfriend. It is super weird. Does that make it a good movie? No, not really. It still doesn't make it bananas enough to elevate it, which is the other disappointment of this as a Hallmark Hall of Fame movie, like your, say, Sarah Plain and Tall, or that one where Michael Jeter is in it playing a gentleman with cognitive issues. The Christmas Train, you would hope, would be a little bit, on that sort of level. It is not. It is more or less standard fare, just with slightly bigger actors attached to it, which is why I am giving The Christmas Train 2 stars. And now let's head over to the animation station. Today, we're pulling into the animation station for Peter Pan, the Disney classic. Again, one that I had not revisited in a very, very long time. It just had a big, hoo-ha re-release, so it seemed a good time as any to revisit it. And I gotta tell you, it's justifiably a classic. This, thinking now in my 30s back on the Disney films, it's easy to look at them and be like, that's probably not, it's probably good, but it's probably not as good as I remember. And with Peter Pan, it's definitely an issue where, no, it's that good. The animation is lovely, the characters are fun, especially Hook and Tinkerbell, but more on that in a little bit. And it also moves. One of the things in revisiting some of these older Disney classics that I've been most impressed by is how quickly the plots of these move. These are relatively short films. These are in the 70 to 80 minute area, which is great. They're not bogged down by a lot of plot. They're given, just enough time to move and move fast. And Peter Pan is one of those. It's a very fun, very fast movie. Now, that said, there are a couple of things that stood out to us. One, watching it now as a 30-something, Peter Pan is scary. And there are shots where he is drawn to look kind of scary, but this idea of a guy who basically flies around London, kidnapping kids and bringing them to his island where they will never be allowed to grow up or see their parents again, while also terrorizing some pirates, Peter Pan, kind of scary. Also, Tinkerbell. Let's talk about Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell is, to borrow the parlance from the show about Apartment 23, Tinkerbell is a little bit of a B. And here's the thing. I love it because she loves it. Tinkerbell, she betrays Peter Pan. She's frequently jealous, but she is so gleeful in her being a bee that it is difficult not to admire her or to have fun with her. The last thing to mention, though, is that there is some problematic content in this movie, particularly as necessitates the Indian village and the song that they sing there. That is rough. As a real, in the middle of this movie, slap-in-the-face reminder about how our values have changed for the better. Still, Peter Pan is a fun and fast movie. It ought to be easy enough to just skip over that scene on your DVD. One wonders at this point why Disney doesn't just release a version of it where they've just kind of left that scene aside. It's gorgeous to look at. There's a lot going on. Peter Pan, 4 stars. Now it's time for nobody's favorite part of the show. Yes, it's the worst of the week. This week's worst of the week is Beastly, a vaguely recent reimagining of the Beauty and the Beast story, where this time, where the Beast is the central character. Normally the Beauty is the central character. This time we're really following the Beast, who is a jerk high school student who makes fun of people who have tattoos for some reason, and so he is cursed by a witch who is one of the Olsen twins. Don't know which one. Maybe it was both of them. Maybe they Michelled it, and one played her some days and one played her the others. I don't know. But she curses him into being beastly. And by beastly, it mostly means she turns him into a poster child for the goth emo club scene, where now he just has some tattoos and he's bald and he has some stuff nailed to his face. He does have a weird kind of open wound along his head. But listen, this guy, to a certain group of gals, is still super hot. And it does not hurt that this dude is ripped, and they do nothing about that. It's very weird. Listen, this is a very tired and lazy movie. Ultimately, our beastly guy kidnaps Vanessa Hudgens into his house to try and get her to fall in love with him. Now, it is important to notice that he does kidnap her. We find out that Vanessa Hudgens' dad, stay with me, is involved with some criminals, and the beastly guy gets him out of his problems with the criminals, but says that he has to have his daughter move in with him for her safety. It's creepy. And then once he has, through nefarious means, secured her into his house, he proceeds to not be particularly interested in learning things about her and what she likes, but trying to figure out ways to emotionally manipulate her into loving him, which, spoiler alert, ultimately works out just fine for him. Neil Patrick Harris is also in this thing as his blind tutor that seems to have Daredevil-like abilities. Listen, this whole thing doesn't make any sense. It is bad at trying to communicate any themes, right? Typically in the Beauty and the Beast, you know, there are themes of learning to love each other and to get past appearances and things like that. But the movie really hampers itself throughout by giving us a character who doesn't really seem to learn much in the way of lessons, particularly as involves interacting with other people, except on a purely incidental basis, and who, frankly, still manages to look pretty hot. It is also a completely unengaging movie that I'm not terribly interested in ever seeing again. Beastly, 1.5 stars. Now it's time for the best of the bunch. You guys, I'm pretty excited about this week's Best of the Bunch because this week it's Ocean's 8. Now, we did not see this at the theater. We were waiting around for it because, listen, this movie could have easily gone either way, right? But I am so happy to tell you that Ocean's 8 is terrific fun. Might even be my favorite of the Ocean series. Now, I can hear the great outcry of the internet that, but my God, Steven Soderbergh didn't direct this one, so it doesn't look as stylish as the others. And it's, you know, it doesn't have George Clooney and stuff in it. I don't care. This was such a fast and fun movie with such an amazing cast of talented women that I could not help but love every single minute of it. And it connected with me in a way that the Ocean films never have before. While I like them and certainly think that they are technically, you know, solid achievements, the Ocean's movies have just never done it for me. But this one really, really did. Like the Ocean's movies, it is a heist. In this case, our heroines are going to rob the Met Gala, and the heist action is very satisfying. Perhaps not as satisfying as another recent heist movie, Logan's Lucky, but still extraordinarily satisfying. And let's talk about that phenomenal cast. Sandra Bullock, Cate Blanchett, Mindy Kaling, Sarah Paulson, Anne Hathaway, Helena Bonham Carter in one of her best roles in a while, Awkwafina, who I am coming to adore more and more every time I see her in something, Rihanna, terrific. Absolutely all of them are just firing on all cylinders. They all have fun and unique characters and specialties that all come together for the big plot. Sandra Bullock, always a shining star, always going to see whatever movie she's doing. Cate Blanchett, killing it as much, if not more so, than she has been killing it lately and getting to do some really badass stuff in this. One last thing I don't want to go too much into detail about the plot of the movie or anything. I want this to be a movie that you get to go out and see and experience yourself. I do want to single out two more things. One, Anne Hathaway, always a treat, and here playing very much a parody of herself and doing a great job of it. And finally, after watching this movie, I went on to the app I use to keep track of the movies I've seen and what I thought about them. And I was looking at some reviews of Ocean's 8. And so another reviewer, and I don't have their screen name, I'm sorry, pointed this out, and it was really, I think, a great and subtle thing that helped add to this movie's greatness, which is that throughout Ocean's 8, all of our heroines are constantly eating and no one ever comments on it. Now, yes, that was a thing that I think was one of Brad Pitt's character's traits in the Ocean's movies, but here it's kind of spread around. The characters are always being seen at like diners and enjoying snacks and things. And as this other reviewer pointed out, and as I want to say here, when have you ever seen a movie where women are eating and it isn't commented on, where it's portrayed just as a part of life and not that it's somehow showing that there's something wrong with them or something right with them or, you know, something crazy? You know, it's that kind of thing, that sort of sophistication in how it's treating the characters that really takes Ocean's 8 up a notch and makes it not the female Ocean's movie, but an Ocean's movie that stars women. It's tremendous. I loved it. Ocean's 8, 4 stars. That is going to do it for this episode of Every Movie Ever. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next time as we keep trying to watch every movie ever made. And don't forget to visit our website, northmetrotv.com/everymovieever. There, you can watch reviews of every movie we've ever covered here on the show, as well as complete episodes. That's northmetrotv.com/everymovieever.